So back in 2020, Bob Dylan just drops this absolute bombshell of a song, nearly 17 minutes long. It's called Murder Most Foul, and it is a deep, deep dive into the heart of a national trauma, the assassination of JFK. But as we're about to see, the song's echoes stretch way beyond 1963, right into our present day. We're going to unpack how this epic piece of work is really a diagnosis of a wound in the American psyche, a wound that you could argue has been festering for decades.
You know, the song doesn't even start with a melody. It starts like a news report with a dateline, Dallas, November '63, and right away you can just feel the dread. Dylan says it's a day that will live on in infamy. He's not just recounting history here, he's planting a flag. He's basically saying this is the spot where a certain version of America died, and it set the stage for this long, slow decay that leads right to the fractured nation we're all living in today.
Okay, so how are we going to tackle this beast of a song? We're going to break it down into 4 parts. First, we'll dive into the brutal details of A Dark Day in Dallas. Then, we'll get into the mess of lies and confusion in The King is Dead. After that, we'll see how culture becomes a kind of lifeline in the Wolfman's playlist. And finally, we'll get to the big one. What is this song really saying about the soul of a nation?
All right, part 1. The song immediately forces us to be eyewitnesses. And there's no soft focus, no poetic filter here. Dylan's language is just brutal. It's unflinching, and it puts us right there on Elm Street at the very moment of impact.
I mean, listen to that. That's not poetry, right? That's the language of a crime report. It hits you with the cold shock of a newspaper headline, just stripping away all the myth-making to leave you with the raw, brutal fact. And then he throws in this really sinister detail. He sings that the timing was right, suggesting this wasn't some random act of madness. No, this was calculated. This was a conspiracy.
Wow. I mean, the lyrics are so visceral, they're almost hard to listen to. And that is exactly the point. Dylan confronts us with the raw, almost mechanical violence of the act. He's forcing us to look directly at the horror that, let's be honest, we'd probably much rather forget.
And you really have to pay attention to the word choice here. The king. He doesn't say the president, he says the king. Why? Because that frames it as something much bigger, something almost primal and mythic. This wasn't just a political assassination. In Dylan's telling, this was a kind of national regicide. They toppled the monarch. Okay, so from the physical act, the song pivots to the psychological fallout. The king is dead. And now we enter this whole new era of confusion, of conspiracy, an era where the very idea of truth itself just completely fractured, right from the moment those shots rang out.
This line right here, this is the pivot for the entire song. It shifts from the what happened to the why. And what does it all mean? What is the truth, and where did it go? I mean, with that one question, Dylan just blows the doors open to all the doubt and the suspicion that has basically haunted America ever since. And here's where it gets really fascinating. You see how he sets up the official story against his darker, much more complex web of questions? He calls it the greatest magic trick ever under the sun, suggesting this massive deception. He points directly at Oswald and Ruby, basically saying the simple answers just aren't going to cut it. And this is the central paradox of the whole event, isn't it? It happened in broad daylight, thousands of people were watching, and yet no one saw a thing. So what does that mean? Is Dylan suggesting a huge cover-up? Or, and this is maybe even darker, was the trauma so deep, so shocking, that we as a nation just collectively chose not to see what was right in front of us? And then, the song just takes this absolutely wild turn. With the truth completely broken, the narrator turns to the radio. He starts desperately calling out requests to the legendary DJ Wolfman Jack. And you realize pretty quickly, he's not just looking for a playlist. He is searching for a lifeline. And the names just start pouring out, a total flood. And it's not random. This is a plea to culture, to music, to art, to help make sense of the absolutely senseless void that was left behind. He's asking for the blues, for rock and roll, for jazz. He wants every sound possible to fill that terrible silence. But it goes way beyond music. He starts referencing movies, actors, even Shakespeare. He's summoning the entire cultural landscape of the 20th century, trying to gather all the pieces of our shared stories to act as a kind of balm, a medicine for a deeply wounded nation. And get this, the total number of cultural references is over 150. So you realize this is not just a playlist. It's like a cultural Noah's Ark. Dylan is trying to load everything that matters onto it to save it from the flood of chaos that was unleashed back in Dallas.
So, where does all this lead? We've had the brutal murder, the conspiracies, this completely desperate cultural playlist. What is Dylan's 17-minute epic ultimately trying to say about the soul of the nation? At its very heart, Murder Most Foul is an elegy. It's a grand, national song of mourning. But the thing being mourned here, it's more than just one man. It is so much bigger, so much more profound, and you can feel that loss in every single line of the song.
And right here, this is the song's ultimate thesis. He just comes right out and says it. For Dylan, the assassination wasn't just political. It was spiritual. It was the moment the soul of a nation was torn away, starting this slow decay. A decay of trust, of shared facts, of national unity. A decay that, you can argue, leads directly to the divided political landscape we're all so familiar with.
So that title, Murder Most Foul, it wasn't just the murder of a president. It was the murder of the new frontier, the murder of an entire era of, maybe, American innocence. When Dylan gives the dying Kennedy that devastating line, "I'm never going to make it to the new frontier," he's not just talking about one man's life. He's talking about the country's journey. The whole song is a lament for what was lost on that road. Hope, trust, and a belief in a future that would never, ever arrive.
And then, in a final, brilliant twist, the very last request the narrator makes is for Wolfman Jack to play Murder Most Foul itself. He's asking the DJ to play the song we're listening to right now. It's this haunting conclusion that leaves us with a really chilling question. Is this story, the story of a nation's soul being torn away, a story that begins with a gunshot in Dallas and echoes through the political divisions of today, is that the only song America has left to play, just stuck on repeat?